Well, I'm from an organization called Laya, which is based in India. And I'm also convener of a network called Indian Network on Ethics and Climate Change. This side event is a merger between EED and INEC. EED is an organization from Germany which supports development groups in developing countries. INEC is a network which focuses mainly on the issue of the climate crisis from the perspective of marginalized communities in India. This topic is on pro-poor and gender-responsive adaptation, and the experiences that will be presented are from India as well as from Bangladesh. What we have here, as the program shows, we will have experiences of 4 grassroots perspectives. We have one which is on called Make, Market and Maintain, which is on really based on entrepreneurship model of women involved in solar projects. We will have a presentation on a cluster energy project in one of the remote areas in Andhra Pradesh in India. We will have a presentation on what we call low carbon farming. These projects are based in India, and we'll have a presentation from Bangladesh, which is essentially on looking at an adaptation plan from a people's perspective, as opposed to the Namas. So with that, we can begin with our presentation. They will focus on a connecting link between adaptation, mitigation, and livelihood. We feel that there is a very close interlinkage between adaptation perspective, between mitigation and livelihood, as I said before. So may I invite Ajita Tiwari, who is from India, and she's the facilitator of INEC, to make the first presentation on women and the solar perspective. Yes. Yeah. And we will begin with a film, and then we will have some remarks from Ajita on that. Yes.
सबसे शुरुआत में तो मतलब यहाँ गांव में बताया गया कि सोलर लाइट का ट्रेनिंग दिया जाएगा, तो महिला लोग बोली ठीक है, मिट्टी तेल जलाने से भी तो बहुत हानि होता है, तो चलिए अब इसी को बत्ती को ही बनाया जाएगा जिसमें कार्बन सबको रोका जाएगा।
तो आँखों पर कार्बन लग रहा है, फिर खाना उना बनाने में भी हम लोग को दिक्कत होता था, दिन भर डिबरी जलाते। हमारा घर भी वैसे ही है, तो किचन में दिन भर अंधेरा रहता था, 9-10 बजे तक हम डिबरी ही जलाते थे। अभी खाना बनाने के लिए भी हम लोग को कोई प्रभाव नहीं पड़ रहा है। जब भी हम लोग को माचिस का भी ज़्यादा खर्च नहीं, सिर्फ चूल्हा जलाने के लिए माचिस खर्च करते हैं और किरासन तेल। जब उठते हैं तब वही लाइट को चिप देते हैं, बन जाता है।
सुबह 6 बजे लालटेन चार्जिंग स्टेशन में लाते हैं, उसको हम जोड़ते हैं।
पैसा देवे का? पैसा देवे जमा करें।
फिर शाम को 6 बजे निकाल देते हैं, लेते हैं एक
Can I have the first slide, please? Well, now, just to familiarize you with the context of the state of Jharkhand, which is presented in the film. Can I have the slide, please? Yeah, press enter. As you can see, Jharkhand is more on the eastern part of India, and the second map shows the different districts in Jharkhand. And if you look at some of the basic statistics in Jharkhand, it has the lowest village electrification rate in India, standing at about 31%, which is the lowest. And here it's important to mention, when we say electrification in the Indian context, the definition, the government official definition says that even if 10% of the households in any village is electrified, the village is deemed to be electrified. So there is a catch there. It also has the second largest population of scheduled tribes, which is where the Ulti village, the case context, is based. And the literacy rate is very poor, about just 18.9, about 19% among the scheduled tribes. This is officially an on-grid village where the government poles have reached. However, these communities receive only 2 to 3 hours of light weekly. And hence, the relevance of this initiative in this region. And this region, this village, has the highest, percentage of women suffering from eye and respiratory problems because of soot deposition from the excessive use of kerosene. Now, this is a broad cost-benefit analysis of the entrepreneurship model, which has been facilitated by women, the tribal women. And as you see, the total production costs for each lantern is about 1,340, with marketing commission and a profit and a minor sale margin. The maximum retail price for each lantern is about 1,700, which is quite a bit in the tribal context. However, there is very quick absorption of these lanterns in the market, which is being marketed by these tribal SHGs. The target for each month is about 100 lanterns, and whereby you see that about 14,750 rupees is what comes to the women enterprise, the SHG comprising of 20 members. So that means that each SHG member gets about 750 rupees just from assembling lanterns per month. So just to give you a broad idea of the figures. Now, the overall results from this project has established that this source of energy, which is from solar, is a reliable source, and it has ensured a kerosene-free illumination, thereby safeguarding women's health and environmental pollution. It has also ensured, and it has showcased, that tribal women can now assemble lanterns, solar lanterns, which is otherwise an exclusive domain of the scientific people. And this is interesting because most of the women are illiterate. So it has a significance there. Also, there's a high degree of ownership because it is being marketed by them. The branding of the lantern has been done by the tribal women themselves. And of course, it has helped in enabling children to study beyond daylight and for women to engage in other income generation activities apart from having access to basic lighting. Now, the broad lessons learned from this initiative, which is a woman enterprise, primarily, it has demonstrated that tribal women, in spite of being illiterate, can play the role of energy service providers. They are now maintaining logbooks and registers, the sales proceeds. However, in doing so, they need capacity building, which is technical as well as non-technical in nature. And in our country context, we see that most of our energy policies have failed to recognize the role of women as domestic energy managers and have ignored their participation completely. And this needs to be addressed. The technologies which are being largely disseminated in the rural areas have to be simple, of course, for easy adoption and transference. And rural technology, as we see from this case, is that technologies become more sustainable when they're promoted as an enterprise, wherein there's scope which gives you an opportunity to generate income apart from meeting your basic energy needs. And of course, there is a huge, huge demand of such home lights in India, because 56% of our households have no access to basic lighting. And these lights are more valued by the women because it frees them of the drudgery. However, it needs a massive upscaling, which is a very big challenge. Yeah, so with these remarks, I would like to close, and maybe we could take up questions and queries that you have in the open floor discussion.
Thanks, thanks, Ajita. We'll go on to the next presentation, so you get an idea of all the presentations. We'll begin again by a film, which is presented here, and then we'll have remarks from Siddharth D'Souza. He's from this organization called Laya, on the decentralized energy option and climate desk of Laya. Yes, Siddharth.
ఇక్కడ సమృద్ధిగా చాలా వనరులు ఉన్నాయి. ఇక్కడ బాగా మంచి సన్లైట్ ఉంది, అలా నీళ్లు ఉన్నాయి. అక్కడ సంవత్సరం పొడుగున విద్యుత్ని ప్రారంభించడం కూడా జరిగింది. ఇక్కడ ఒక 6 కిలోవాట్ పవర్ జనరేట్ చేసే హైడ్రో ప్రాజెక్ట్ కట్టడం జరిగింది.
ఇది దీన్ని నిర్మించే 3 సంవత్సరాలు అవుతుందండి. ఇది మాకు చాలా ఉపయోగకరం ఉందండి. ఇది అలాగా 3 గ్రామాలకి 3 ఊర్లో పనిచేస్తుందండి. ఇలా రాసమెట్ట ఒకటి, పాతకోట 2 వీధులండి. ఏంటంటే మాకు ఇదివల్ల చీకట్లు ఉండేవాళ్ళం అండి. మేము
ఈ కరెంట్ బాగుందండి. ఎప్పటికప్పుడు మాకు ఏదైనా పనులు కథకాలు పెళ్ళిళ్ళు జరిగినా సొంత కరెంట్ లాగా వాడుకునేవాళ్ళం. ఇది ఎప్పటికి వస్తుందో తెలియదంటే ఎప్పటికి పోతుందో తెలియదండి పెద్ద కరెంట్ అయితే. అదైతే మేము పెళ్ళిళ్ళ టైం కానీ డైలీగా ఉంచుకునే వాళ్ళం అండి. పగలు కూడా ఫంక్షన్లు కానీ ఇలాంటి జరిగినప్పుడు కూడా పగలు కూడా అలా ఉంచుకునే వాళ్ళం అండి. ఇది అలా లేదండి, ఏదో టైంకి వస్తుంది పోతుంది, దీనికి నమ్మకం లేదండి. అందు గురించి జనరేటర్లతోనే వాడుకునే వాళ్ళం.
About which is very remote in a tribal area in North Andhra Pradesh. These regions have actually been recently electrified already, and and the government is sort of looking and really pushing to electrify a lot of villages in India. But still, already, as Ajita indicated earlier, 50% of India still remains unelectrified. The government now, the 50% in the Indian context is a lot of people. I mean, it's huge amounts of electricity, which means, I mean, it's a bit like, you know, right now the amount of electricity that we produce and consume is just a little bit less than Germany and France. So you can imagine, it's a lot of electricity, and that means now if you have to double that or triple it, in whichever way that you see it, and so that everybody has access, we need a lot of electricity, and the sources for that the government seems to still seems to indicate has to come from non-renewable resources, especially coal. Right. So now in this context, decentralized energy becomes something that, you know, something extremely important, especially from the point of view of being renewable. Also, in a way that it can be managed and controlled by the community itself. Now, I'll just give you a brief overview of what these technologies are and how we have been sort of trying to put them together. The first is micro hydro. This is essentially what it looks like, at least in a diagrammatic sort of way, and you've already seen a little bit in the film. Could you just... Okay, so first you basically you make a small dam across the stream, channel water into a what is called into a channel, and then it goes to a desalting tank, and then could you quickly go? Yeah. Okay, and then from there it goes to a 4-bay tank. This is just technically how it. I mean the effort. I'm just trying to indicate how much effort that goes into sort of building this. And then finally you have the penstock which comes down, and then please can you, through a thresh track, and then down. Just keep slowing. Okay, yeah, and then from the tank, from the penstock right down into that little house which produces the electricity. I mean, this is how it basically needs. I mean, it's basically worked out. And then present, I think then, yeah, but just once more. Yeah, it's the machine, and yeah, then you have electricity. Okay, so this is how it basically works, and it takes about well, depending on the site, about 6 months to a year to build it. Yeah, can you just go ahead, please? Yeah, and the other one is, of course, is solar, solar lanterns in this particular case. And the way that we have worked it out is to have the more complicated hydro first in one village, and then the surrounding villages where we cannot have electricity from hydro, we bring in solar lanterns. And the thing with solar lanterns is that, you know, they need to be maintained, and it's not easy, especially in the monsoon times. And therefore, when you have a hydro close by, it sort of helps in its maintenance. So in a sense, they are basically complement each other. And there, in those conditions, this is, sorry, can you go back, please? And this is what it essentially replaces. Yeah. Now, also, in some of in the adjoining district, actually, the forests are not as much, especially in the hills, and that means that women have to walk long distances to get firewood for cooking. And then, can you just one more time, please? Yeah, and these stoves would essentially then replace the previous ones. And these three technologies is what we have brought together and sort of put in proximity in a 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 villages depending, which is how we have sort of termed the cluster sort of approach to decentralized energy, right? Also with that is sustainable agriculture, which Sheila will talk about a little bit more in detail later. But this is again to do with also within the same cluster of villages to have alternative models of agriculture. Yeah. The key point, I think, at least in my experience with this, is that that throughout these 3-4 interventions, that the community, is essentially a producer of energy, is a consumer, and also manager. And so it's a sort of an integrated, it's a privilege, frankly, that even we don't have as urban dwellers. You can basically produce when you need and put it off when you don't, as simple as that. Now, of course, these are, again, just islands of interventions. Just few villages here and there, and in a sense of taking it to the next level in terms of upscaling, becomes pertinent. Now, how does one do that? Now, of course, the 4 possible ways, and the first priority I think that needs to go is obviously in terms of policy, in government policy, and therefore government spending. The second is similar to what Ajita was talking about in terms of building entrepreneurial models around these things, and wherever possible, obviously, and then looking at overseas aid somehow facilitating this. Finally, and probably not the very best option ethically, but something that also has become prominent, particularly in India, is in terms of carbon credits being used or being earned to raise resources to be able to upscale initiatives like this. So basically, this is what it is. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Siddharth. We will show you one more brief film on less carbon, more food, followed by remarks from Sheila Benjamin. She is the executive director of a network in South India called Sindhya, and the network comprises of organizations working on various grassroots issues. So if we can have the film, please.
For us, low carbon farming implies promoting what
instead of fertilizers, chemical fertilizer, going to reduce some of the gases that are going to be emitted. It has taken a project known as low carbon.
We have Anantapur, we have 2 NGOs like Action Fraternal, SETS. We have Sacreds in Bidadi, Ramnagar region, and then in Tamil Nadu.
Good evening, friends. The film that you've just seen is a film on low carbon farming, which is being undertaken as a pilot project covering about 20,000 acres and approximately 5,000 plus farmers, small and marginalized farmers, in the 3 states of Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and Karnataka of India. And of course, as all of you know, India is predominantly an agrarian country where 80% of the population live in rural and tribal areas. And agriculture is also one of the main occupations of the rural and tribal population. And ever since the late 60s, early 70s, when the Green Revolution was introduced to increase yield in a very short time, it was the beginning of the destruction of agriculture through high external inputs, destructive agriculture. As in the film they talked about the hide-up practices. And in the context of the present climate change and the ensuing climate crisis, it is only very appropriate that we attempt to improve we attempt not only to reduce carbon emissions and sequestrate carbon, but also try to improve the quality of the lifestyle of farmers by promoting low carbon farming. And in India, the farm sector offers considerable opportunity for sequestrating carbon through increasing the content of soil carbon and also decreasing the carbon emissions. As most of you will be aware that in the global worldwide, agriculture constitutes carbon emissions from agriculture constitute about 14% of the greenhouse gases. And in India, in the farming sector, it is about 28%, which includes methane, nitrous oxide, and carbon dioxide, both from agriculture and from livestock. So in such a context, low carbon farming offers farmers opportunity to offset their carbon emissions and thereby improve their lifestyle by shifting from highly destructive agricultural practices to practices that are which have low inputs. And also, as I said, improve the quality of life. It's not only low carbon farming, it is low carbon farming plus. Besides sequestrating carbon, soil carbon, besides reducing emissions, the quality of life of the farmer is improved by better soil fertility, better soil management, improved soil fertility, increase in the yield of farm produce because of organic inputs. Therefore, they're able to get a better price also for the organic food that they are able to produce. And this organic food will be in future, if properly promoted, is not only in the hands of the rich, but also in the hands of the poor. The poor farmer can be in the hands of the poor farmer, thereby leading to more improved nutrition also for the women, for the children, and for the elderly, besides the farmers. Our position, therefore, is that sustainable agriculture is a starting point for an outright rejection of the high destructive agriculture that is being practiced in India today. And therefore, low carbon farming promotes a system of agriculture where there is an integration of trees, crops, and animals at the household level. That is what we basically are trying to attempt in this pilot phase. And through this low carbon farming, farmers are offered a basket of practices which can help to reduce the emissions, minimize the emissions by a variety of sustainable agricultural practices, like some of the practices that you just saw in the film, where they talk of managing water in rice and straw production, that is the SRI, the Systems of Rice Intensification, which is now being promoted in most of the third world countries, Indonesia leading the process, Philippines, and now in India also. Then, of course, multi-cropping, intercropping, all to improve the soil carbon content. Mulching, using organic manure. There's a lot of, in India today, there are a lot of indigenous systems of developing organic fertilizers which keep away, which also help in pest control. And these are all very important practices in low carbon farming. Now, through this process, as I said, this is a pilot project where about 5,000 farmers are involved in this process. We have taken into consideration, we are looking at low carbon farming basically from a gender perspective, where women in the 3 states that I just mentioned, we have a relatively high percentage of women, of homes which are headed by women farmers. So in the promotion of the various basket of sustainable agricultural practices, we are sensitive to their needs and try to promote practices that are gender sensitive. In addition to that, we are also involved in training women to take up leadership qualities and actively participate in the whole process of promoting low carbon farming. So these are some of the things that we are doing, and as a result of this, as I just had earlier told you about the various low carbon pluses that are visible once this is taken up. But since this is still a pilot project where we are able to promote, we are able to sell carbon emissions as VERs, voluntary emission rates, because there's no defined, developed methodology for this as of now. And all of you know that in the current negotiations, agriculture has never been in the main text, but always on the periphery. So we do not have a defined, definite methodology. But in this pilot project, we are being helped by a number of scientists, both from India and abroad, and low carbon farming experts. So as a result of this, today what is happening, the process is like this. The 5 NGOs have been trained in how to undertake the whole process of low carbon farming. They have selected, they shortlisted the villages which they require, shortlisted the participating farmers also. They have formed farmers clubs, village committees to decentralize the whole process and also make it more participatory in nature. We have completed collecting demographic data. This data has been now fed into a monitoring solution. So, and then we are also collating a list of various sustainable agricultural practices and trying to look at which practice definitely generates more carbon emissions. And so those are the practices which are going to be followed in a systematic way to to get more carbon emissions. Then now most partners are in the process of delineating discrete plots and taking GPS readings and feeding it into the polygon records. It's a highly scientific procedure that we are trying to develop, which hitherto is, as one of our mentors say, it's a leap by faith. We don't know where we are going, but definitely we are going somewhere. And these 5 NGOs are in the process of developing a methodology which can be an example for other countries, other small and marginalized farmers to follow. And once we are also making baseline calculations and estimating the type of, the amount of emission reductions that are possible. We've had a lot of successes, we've had a lot of failures also, but nevertheless, the process is going on, and shortly the world will see how it is possible to reduce the carbon emissions and by the defined methodology that we have developed. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheila. We'll now have the last but not the least presentation from Jehangir Maso. He's from an organization called Coastal Development Partnership NGO, which is an NGO based in Bangladesh, a rights-based NGO, and they've done quite a bit of advocacy campaigns for conservation of the coastal wetlands and biodiversity of the Sundarbans. What he will do is to share with us his work on transforming marginalized women to climate leaders.
Thank you, Nafisa. Welcome to everybody. Basically, we have started an initiative to develop People's Climate Change Adaptation Action Plan. So, how the National Adaptation Plan of Action links with the village level. So, through this process, basically this is an ongoing process, and we are sharing our learnings and reflections. And we work with 4,800 marginalized and poor people, and 50% of them are women. So here the presentation mainly focused on our learnings with the women, these 2,400 women who involved in this participatory action research as an active researcher. So what we would like to highlight in our presentation, that the knowledge and experience of the poor and marginalized women in climate change adaptation is not highlighted adequately in the international forums, and because this experience linked with the real life evidences. Another aspect we identified that adaptation, this climate change risk has a many problem and is beyond a single woman's ability. So there should be kind of a solidarity among the women to tackle this climate insecurity. And the most important learning is that I think not really recognized, the determination and willingness of the poor women to use whatever they have so that their future generation could survive. Because when we are talking with the climate change, basically we are talking the future today. And these women, they are the carrier of future. They hold our future generations, and their determination and willingness we never really focused on. So next please. So this is how we started this People's Climate Change Adaptation Action Plan. So this is just the earlier one. So this is a typical village, and participatory action research processes. Even women later started using methodological, the scientifically or statistically valid approaches. Next, please. And the women who were involved in the process, their monthly household income total is less than $50 per month. And they have at least like 2 of their household members are working, and 1 of them is child labor. Because these women are all women-headed households. So when women's fare in the labor market is much lower than the men, so that's why they need additional person to work to fill that gap. And that's why women-headed households have much more child labor than their male-headed households. And most of the women living is, I think, the most, it's a shanty-like thing. Even, I think, worse than the slum. And many of the areas, the women, why they are women-headed household? Because they lost their husbands. And either the fishermen, they lost in the different cyclone and tornado in the sea, or the tiger killed their husband. So this is the typical setup of these women who were involved in this action research. And this is just a view that when we use this research, we really followed ecosystem-based approach, because we believe that climate change don't respect the national or political boundary, but it follows the ecosystem boundary. So, and women have a more attachment with the ecosystem. And that's why we followed this ecosystem-based approach, and we worked in 10 districts of Bangladesh. You can see the green spaces in different parts of the Bangladesh, and it covers 5 ecosystems. So that means the People's Climate Change Action Plan has a more national context. Next, please. So how we really started this development process? Because most of the time when we talk with adaptation, we are trying to highlight different case studies or outputs. But if we ask that how we can start adaptation, there is still, I think, a shadow area. Nobody really knows a process how we should do that. So we started this development process as a group-based approach in 10 districts with 10 local NGOs facilitated these things, and we developed 240 village-level adaptation action plan. That 1 for men, 1 for women. And then it gradually came to national and 20 district level. So, and our ultimate focus was like to how the community resilience, because it was more both women and men. So next, please. I'm not going to details, just showing there is also a methodological thing. So that means it is not just you just go and start a process. You have to prepare, you have to develop your capacity to go through this kind of action research involving this marginalized and poor women. And this is how, from the village level, in the district level and the national level, these action plans are coming up. And also we use the database, because to update, even if there is some action plans, if people need to update their action plan in future, so that there is the option that we can do, because we have developed the GIS-based system, database system, so that we can continuously update. So one learning is we really found that women, especially the elderly women, are the real observer of climate change. So all the action researcher women, they are more than 45 or 40 years old, because we consider the 30 years experience is required to understand the climate change. So if somebody is from 15 years, she can really reflect the changes, even 5 years or 10 years basis. And this is basically how we call that, how we can transform a village woman into a climate leader, because in the administrative context, we have village, but the first local level government unit is the union level. Then we have the Upazila level, then the district level. So one woman from a village, she's from Khulna, she from the village level started this journey and finally get herself positioned in the district level committee. And district level committee is a joint committee. It's not only for the women. So this is kind of an indication that through a process, this took 1 year to develop these women as a focal person for their, not only the community, but also for the district, for other women. So some of the common people's climate change action plan, I'm just reading the women context that is coming, is like homestead vegetable cultivation, because they are basically more focused on the family nutrition, and they're also thinking like organic farming, to how to support organic farming. And they identified a couple of the natural plants that has the potentiality to develop biofertilizer and biopesticides that is common in the community. So this is really a new thing for us. We never thought that these plants can be used for this purpose. And then there, no, just a second. No, the earlier one, please. So it's like a different, even the social enterprise, they're thinking goat rearing, duck rearing, nursery and plantation. Next, please. Now here is basically the problem. And I think the earlier presentation from our Indian colleagues can answer also a little bit, because some of the projects that women wanted to implement is linked with the energy, linked with the biogas system, so that their livelihood quality can be enhanced. They have much more time for their children, they have a better health, and all these you can typically call it's a mitigation initiatives could be. So the challenge could be how we can deliver or integrate these kind of things with the adaptation framework, these women's needs. So this is our biggest learning. Basically, when we talk on the things like top and bottom approach, so we were first initiated this whole thing as a bottom to top approach. And later, through this 1 year, working with these women and others, they developed, this is called circular approach. We call it circle of hope. They said, we can develop simultaneously in different circles according to the capacity. And one circle can enhance other circles' capacity. So this is through this, the leadership or the transformation of the women's capacity can be transmitted. So this idea is really quite unique. We have not thought, maybe the policymakers, they can think, political economists, they can also think that what could be in that, because we just identified this is a new thing, a learning beyond our expectation. Next, please. So here I would like to highlight one of the aspects that the role of media also important, because I am quoting one single incident that is not even highlighted in our national media. There is a tornado in 8 villages in Borishal districts, and it happened in October 8, 2010. And this tornado destroyed 300, like these women households who have worked with us, and destroyed 15,000 trees and other things. So as it is not highlighted in the media, government initiative was not there. But we have this group, women groups, they go to the Upazila level with this information, their household damage and others. and the whole process facilitated, and they get government supports. And that is really unnoticed, like how women could do this kind of initiative. And also if media is not highlighting the local level sudden this disaster or very dramatic climatic event, then it could hamper the local development process. Basically, one important context is that this area in the last 150 years have never faced a tornado. So, the tornado is unknown to both the young and the older generation. But the thing that really encouraged us, because here we are working with these women groups, we thought that maybe we might stop the planning process because their houses damaged or destroyed. But this women's courage really make us to go on forth. And that's probably we have missed earlier, the women's courage and determination to carry on the planning process. And one thing, the tornado, it destroyed not only the houses, all the other resources that they need to sustain, like their trees are pulled out, their crops are damaged, and even on the 8th day of this tornado, when I have visited there, I found there laughing and taking their livelihood in a normal way. So this is the biggest courage to address the climate calamity. Next, please. So basically what strategy we have learned from this thing, because when we are doing this people's climate change action, adaptation action plan, it is basically we are trying to identify the people's will and how we can link this people's will with the political will. The COP is a political will process. So we found that the thing we have done, there is a very important context is capacity building of the grassroots NGOs, CBOs, and women groups. Because without that, it is not possible to consistently follow a process simultaneously in different ecosystems. Another is this, when you have the action plans, we can influence governments to address the unmet adaptation needs. Especially, we developed kind of a 8 or 12 pages proposal, complete proposal with these women groups that we are now even giving to the government officials and locally elected representatives so that they can pursue, because our approach, they have developed 240 village action plans, but our resource capacity will only can support maybe 20% of these plans. So 80% of the plans need supports, and for that, that's why somebody is telling that why adaptation finance is important. Maybe this is a reality that we have to check with. And so we are telling our government that, okay, we are developing the proposals, government can work on that. Whatever we can do, we are doing. So rest of that, not only the government, even the industrial supporters can do. If you have a plan, then you can go. It will save time, and it is basically developed by the community, not by the NGOs. Next, please. So we have a few demands on these learning perspectives to these COP17 and CMP7 negotiators. One is basically strongly recognize poor and marginal women potential on climate change issues at community level and accept women as equal working partners many in adaptation activities. Most importantly, we demand establish strong and effective women climate leadership in planning, decision making, and implementation of climate change adaptation action, and implement the proper women-led development model to address climate-induced livelihood vulnerability. Because ultimately, it is the climate security and equals to livelihood security. And there you will find water security, energy security, every insecurity is linked with this kind of climate insecurity. Most importantly, what is needed, the political will, for the global political will is needed to create an enabling environment where these poor women's learning and knowledges can be maintained. Most importantly, what we focus on the social peace and the resource sharing process, especially in the crisis time, what we have seen in the tornado-stricken area, is an encouraging, and the political will should really learn from that experiences. Next. Yes. So basically, I think this conclusion also linked with many of our Indian colleagues. What is our final findings? We found that knowledge fuels the courage in women, and the courage in women makes them demanding empowerment. And the demand of empowerment gradually makes them leader. And if they are in leadership, then the same process will be going on. Thank you for your kind patience.
Thanks, Masum. Before I open the House to the floor, I'd just like to make a few concluding remarks. These presentations are really, pilot projects. And I think that they, in a way, point the way forward for a climate-resilient future from a community perspective. And I think that it's important to recognize that these projects not only reduce vulnerability, not only build capacities of communities, but I think it is important to recognize that they are part of the solution to a larger problem by pointing a way to a low carbon pathway. And I think that is important to consider, which is not to say that it is the poor who must bear the burden of reducing emissions. That is not what we are trying to say. But I think these projects, in a way, point to a vision of a future which ensures both development as well as a low carbon pathway. And I think that is important in recognizing in these projects. The question, I think, to our minds is that do these experiences have relevance for a wider policy debate? And why are we discussing it here in COP17? And I think that there are some important points that we need to recognize. One is that these, in a way, point to a bottom-up approach. And most government initiatives, and we can say that from both the experiences in Bangladesh and India, is that most projects are, in a way, top-down. And I think these, in a way, point a way forward of having processes which are bottom-up. The second important factor, which I think emerged from almost all the presentations, was the importance of the gender factor, which is important in our countries where we need to have this upfront in our policy framework. For example, if you look at India, the National Action Plan on Climate Change does not really take into account the factor of gender sensitivity. We're not just talking about women, but we're talking about a gender-sensitive response to policies. There is a need, yes, these are pilot projects. There is a need to upscale these projects. We need many, many, many more of these projects. And yet the policy framework that exists today within the, climate crisis discourse is not adequate to really support these kinds of projects. For example, you have a CDM, you have a clean development mechanism, which has as one of its key agenda sustainable development. But yet, when you look at projects in our countries, you find that most of the projects are really, they are really in a way cornered by, by the corporate sector. And communities hardly ever benefit, from CDMs, whether it is through the UNFCCC or voluntary. The point is that we need a framework within the policy of CDMs to create possibilities for such projects to be upscaled. So we are talking about pro-poor carbon projects. And I think that is something that we need to challenge within the larger policy framework. On the burden of adaptation, I think communities, if we look at it for the last 100 years, they have borne the burden of adaptation, because communities have always been coping. And therefore, in a way, that is what has made them resilient. But yet, that is now being threatened with the climate crisis, with the increasing vulnerability of communities. It's extremely important that we act urgently, fast, and now. And that is not what is happening in our climate discourse at the COPs. So one can talk about the adaptation fund, one can talk about the green climate fund, but one is still talking about governance structures. But when it comes to action, I think we are far behind what needs to be done. And that is therefore something that we need to really, really work towards. And finally, I think that these projects do demonstrate hope. And I think that in a way, they demonstrate the need to rethink the development paradigm and towards an ethical response to the climate crisis. And I think that is very, very crucial. So I'll stop here and open the floor for any questions that you might like to ask to the panelists.
I would like to thank all of the presenters. I think that the efforts that you're making are admirable, and they show us, as you were mentioning, this need to be able to start implementing and piloting some of the ideas that we have been discussing, and some of the ideas as well that are reflected in the policies currently. My question is then, what were the challenges? What were the challenges that you faced during the implementation of these projects as a means for us to learn what potential challenges we could face and what good practices as well arose from these pilot projects? Particularly, I'm very interested in the fact that you mentioned, for example, in your last presentation, this necessity to transform women into climate leaders. And I was wondering if you did face some resistance in that sense, and how you addressed it in order to avoid the conflict, the gender conflict that might arise. Thank you.
In fact, at the very beginning, people was talking climate crisis or this kind of changes is a God's curse. So that's the first challenge we faced. So this is not the God curse, it's the man-made thing. And then came that what these women knows, basically from the men perspectives. So when we showing like changing the climate trend in a decade-long way, and it found that women have much more better observation than the men, because men are busy with many things, but women has to really follow the climate and other, especially for the cooking, fuels, woods, or the water. So they have to really follow the climate system. And we really took the initiatives to involve elder persons because they are respected, and when they're talking these changes, so the younger generations, they're listening, and mostly like 80 years old women is sharing these experiences. So this is getting a setting to get that obstacle. And when we are also working in two groups, first also there is a resistance. Why not together? But that's why we also came together, but we said that there is a different needs. Biologically also they have different needs. So at the village level we have a different women and men groups, but gradually there from the union level it is one group. So as a committee who will lead this process, and there men gradually accepting, because many of the things men found that they are not even able to handle. Because for example, domestic water security, culturally men never really think about that. So they recognize that, okay, for these kind of things, they have to provide a space to women. So there are also many other examples. I'm giving you one example. I can tell you more even, but I think other can also share some challenges.
Case that I was referring to, the solar lantern case. The women said, when we were asking them, regarding what were the challenges, what were the problems that you had, while adopting this technology, they said that the technology was not really a problem, yeah, because the government, through certain initiatives driven by national policies, had a program of providing solar lanterns to tribal communities. However, there were, ambiguities relating to corruption, and that the tribals were not getting the lanterns, so it was closed. But they said that men were the problem, because they couldn't see how women could serve as energy providers. How could they assemble lanterns? It is beyond their capacities. But when these women were adamant that they value light, it would free them of drudgery of collecting firewood, going to the depot and fetching kerosene, which is about 1.5 kilometers away. They were adamant. And when they saw the benefits of light coming in, when they started assembling it, then the men said, well, they are the Indira Gandhis of today. Indira Gandhi was the Prime Minister, the first lady Prime Minister of India. And they said that it built so much of confidence that now men come to them and ask them about soldering, which is a process of putting two wires together, And I think these are the few things, and they have kind of had the ability to show and to prove that women can do things which, when men don't see to foresee, which, they try to undermine. They undermine women's abilities to do certain things which are considered to be primarily a, man's domain. So I think challenges are the men in this case, and this was primarily the challenge, not the technological know-how or understanding of the the technology. And there was also an interesting case last month in this village, the Ulti village in Lohardaga. There was a girl whose engagement was on, and they had hired a generator from the nearest town, and the generator broke down during the process. They didn't know, they were running helter-skelter. Finally, they ran to the neighboring village, this village, and said, please give us your lanterns. Yeah, there's a wedding, there's an engagement ceremony going there. And this is how, the value, they've started valuing light, and now there's a huge demand for solar lights. And women will, this establishes the women entrepreneurship model, which is going to bring them additional money, apart from a status improvement in livelihood conditions.
Yeah, just to put it in a nutshell, what I feel the greatest challenge is addressing the issue of patriarchy. Because in India, we come from a very conservative society where women are always thought to be inferior, behind the men. So whether it is access to education, access to health, or access to technology, women were always, it was always thought that women are not capable of accessing all this. So, it's just complementing what Ajita had said. It's the issue of addressing patriarchy. But now that men are seeing how women are reacting, responding to situations, and coming out in the forefront, they are beginning to accept them. And this was also, I think we should also give, I would give credit to our local government initiatives where women were organized into what we call the self-help groups, which is widely promoted in India, and particularly in the southern states, which has brought women out into the forefront to be able to make them to come together. Their space has been created for them to talk about their problems, to learn new things, and to take up leadership qualities. So that is now slowly being addressed, the issue of patriarchy, but still there are a lot of barriers still to be broken.
Any other questions, comments, reflections? Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Valerie Davis from Austin, Texas, Enviromedia Social Marketing, and I'm here via the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. In my regular job, we work on campaigns that change behavior related to public health and the environment. First, I want to say very important presentation from you, and I'm glad I got to hear it. My one question is, can any of the panelists speak with more specifics about the health effects related to the traditional ways, like the kerosene lanterns, the cook stoves, and even the damaging agriculture practices? Thank you.
with the traditional wood stoves that will be used. So the trouble is that they've been using it almost for generations now. So in terms of health effects or impacts, they're being. I mean, you only realize it when you have something that is an alternative. You see, so right now they're just using it. I mean, they're using it all this. In fact, I mean, also to the other question that was made earlier. I mean, the point that was made. You see, the thing is that you only make a switch when you see it. When you have a vision of what the switch could be. Now, in our case, in the villages that we work, there is no alternative, or there's no alternative that can be conceived. So you don't know what it means. So in a way, when I went to the village, for example, and I introduced the idea of hydro, they thought I was joking. I mean, actually they thought I was raving mad. So, the idea of bringing electricity from what? I mean, what are you talking about? And that too from my stream. I mean, that's not possible. So in a way, when we brought these stoves in also, I mean, initially there wasn't clear notion as to what these were. And again, now the men obviously have control over resources. Therefore, the investment into making these or buying these or, constructing these is not necessarily with the women. So, in a sense, well, so I can't really answer your question in terms of the specifics of how they have been sort of damaged, but we know that after the new stoves have come, there is a lot of, they say that, well, there's less eye burning, the respiratory problems have, decreased. Generally there is a feeling of being healthier. That's what I sense from my interaction with the people who have been using these stoves for the last 4 or 5 years.
Any further questions, reflections, or comments?
My name's Nagita. I'm from Australia. I'm representing Speak Your Mind News. I just wanted to ask, how do you believe that the projects you've instituted in these communities might, what shape do you think it would take for women in the future and the development of women's confidence and representation and equality in the future?
You're asking how in the future the women capacity.
Where you've already instituted these programs, how do you think the women will continue to develop confidence into the future?
See, largely the confidence comes from seeing that you are able to deliver a product which is light, and then, of course, from upscaling, they have, the community in this case, the women have a fund, and the proceeds from the profit go back to the fund, which goes to upscale, increase the number of products, solar lanterns in this case, and that brings in more money. So they are financially much more secure, and this instills a lot of confidence. Yeah, and
what shape do you think it would take for women in the future and the development of women's confidence and representation and equality in the future?
You're asking how in the future the women capacity.
Where you've already instituted these programs, how do you think the women will continue to develop confidence into the future?
see, largely the confidence comes from seeing that you are able to deliver a product which is light, And then, of course, from upscaling, they have the community, in this case, the women have a fund, and the proceeds from the profit go back to the fund, which goes to upscale, increase the number of products, solar lanterns in this case, and that brings in more money. So they are financially much more secure, and this instills a lot of confidence. Yeah, and yeah.
In the case of low carbon farming, this is a VER project. So, unlike CR projects, CDMs, which is monopolized, as Nafisa had said, by the corporates, by the industry, where the carbon revenue that is earned by the corporates goes back to them. Here, we are very conscious that whatever carbon revenue comes to the farmer or to the poor family, it will go back to them. Nobody is going to take it away from them. So then they get the capacity of becoming confident that they are earners. They are able to earn. And also, this, whether it is the decentralized energy options or whether it's low carbon farming, eventually we are hoping that these women would become social entrepreneurs. That's very, very important, because through low carbon farming, they can promote organic food, which is a social enterprise. Through decentralized energy options where their women are producing lanterns, it's a social enterprise. So there is every possibility of them becoming maybe small capitalists in a more positive sense. So that is there with the income, and in the process becoming empowered. That is what we ultimately are aiming. Besides, of course, improving the quality of their lives.
In fact, our process shows that climate change adaptation is an issue of local governance. So this is basically the real institutionalization of women's space in the governance mechanism. So that means if we can really upskill this kind of process, that means in the whole policy framework, especially our national context, all the women will get this benefit, more empowered legally. And another aspect is when women are working together, they are developing solidarity. So this solidarity is basically big assets, especially in terms of climate insecurity risks. Because when you have no rise, maybe some other women will help you to rise or this. So this is the framework will empower women and provide them strength to go for further initiatives. But our main focus is that these women's issues should be in the national policy making phases and local development process by the government, because it is the government's responsibility to make this, support the citizens to develop climate resilient pathway. So, because we are facilitators, we are not delivering service, we can develop model that government and others can uptake. So I think the most important part is how we can institutionalize in the legislative framework these women's roles and this space.
So I think that we've exhausted our time. There are some publications on the table in front, just in case you are interested. Please feel free to pick them up. And thank you very much for listening.